The Galactic Concord was a beacon of hope and harmony in the vastness of space. For countless generations, the member species had lived in an unprecedented age of peace and cooperation, their rivalries and conflicts of the past relegated to the history books. United by their shared values of compassion, scientific advancement, and a reverence for all sentient life, the Concord had ushered in a new era of prosperity and understanding. On the bustling capital world of Ilium, towering crystalline spires and shimmering hover plazas bore witness to this cooperative utopia. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and hues mingled freely, exchanging ideas, trading resources, and exploring the mysteries of the cosmos together. Children of diverse alien species played in the lush, sculpture-dotted parks, their joyful laughter filling the air. In the grand governmental complex at the heart of the city, representatives from the Concord's hundreds of member worlds convened to discuss matters of interstellar policy and diplomacy. Though their physiologies and cultures might have differed, the delegates were united in their commitment to preserving the Concord's ideals of tolerance, nonviolence, and mutual respect. The Caravathi have proposed a new energy-sharing network that could vastly improve resource distribution across our systems. Councillor Thelis, a towering amphibious being, addressed the assembly. If we can secure funding for the necessary infrastructure, this could be a tremendous boon for our less developed member worlds. A chorus of approving murmurs rippled through the chamber. Thelis smiled, his bulbous eyes crinkling with satisfaction. The Concord had always prided itself on its ability to put aside individual interests for the greater good. In the observation balcony above, a young Illuvian diplomat named Juris watched the proceedings with a sense of quiet pride. As a newly minted member of the diplomatic corps, he still marveled at the seamless cooperation on display, a far cry from the internecine conflicts that had plagued his homeworld in generations past. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" A melodic voice spoke from beside him. Jairus turned to see a graceful elderly priestess, her violet robes flowing like liquid mercury. The Concord has achieved what so many civilizations could only dream of. Jairus nodded. Indeed. I still remember the stories my grandparents told of the great wars that nearly tore our galaxy apart. To think we've moved beyond such senseless violence. The priestess regarded him with a serene smile. The path to enlightenment is paved with struggle, young one. But the Concord has shown that when we embrace our common humanity, there is no limit to what we can accomplish. Jairus found himself captivated by her words. As he gazed out over the bustling city, he couldn't help but wonder what challenges the future might hold. But in this moment of tranquility, he felt a profound sense of hope. Hope that the Concord's ideals would continue to guide the galaxy towards an ever brighter tomorrow. Little did he know that the arrival of a new and terrifying threat would soon test the limits of that hope, shattering the Concord's compassion and forcing them to confront the full scope of their own vulnerability. The day of reckoning was fast approaching. The tension in the Concord Council chambers was palpable as the massive angular silhouette of the alien vessel loomed on the holographic display. Councillor Thelis leaned forward, his webbed fingers gripping the edge of the podium as he addressed the assembly. Members of the Concord, we are facing a grave situation. This unidentified starship has breached our borders and is currently holding position in the Ilium system. His deep, gravelly voice echoed through the chamber. All attempts at communication have been rebuffed. Our sensors indicate it possesses weaponry and technology far beyond anything we've encountered before. Worried murmurs rippled through the delegates. Jairus felt a knot of apprehension form in the pit of his stomach. The Concord had not faced a true existential threat in living memory. What could this alien vessel possibly want? We must approach this situation with utmost caution, Thelis continued. Our principles of nonviolence and diplomacy have served us well, but we cannot rule out the possibility of hostile intent. I've convened this emergency session to discuss our course of action. The elderly priestess from earlier rose, her flowing robes rustling softly. Councillors, I urge us to exhaust all avenues of peaceful engagement before even considering the use of force. These aliens may simply be lost or confused. Violence should always be the absolute last resort. A chorus of assent rose from the delegation, but Jarrus noticed a few faces bearing expressions of wariness and doubt. The threat of the unknown vessel clearly weighed heavily on them. As the debate raged on, Jarrus found his gaze repeatedly drawn to the alien craft's ominous silhouette. There was something unsettling about its angular, aggressive design, a stark contrast to the graceful, organic aesthetics of Concord technology. Suddenly, a piercing alert klaxon shattered the air, causing the delegates to fall silent. One of the aides rushed to the podium, his face painted with panic. "Counselors, the alien vessel has opened fire. It's targeting our orbital defense platforms." Thelus' eyes widened in shock. "What? Hail them immediately. Demand they cease their attack." But even as the order was given, the holographic display erupted in a cascading series of explosions as the alien ship's brutal barrage tore through the Concord's defenses with terrifying ease. Jarrus watched in horror as the elegant spires of the capital's orbital infrastructure crumbled under the relentless assault. "They're not responding," the aide cried. "Our communications are being jammed." The chamber descended into chaos as the delegates broke into a frenzy of shouting and recrimination. Jarrus felt his heart pounding in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was no simple misunderstanding. These aliens were intent on destruction. Thalus raised his hands, commanding the room's attention. "Enough. We must act decisively to protect our people. Mobilize our planetary defense forces immediately. Evacuate all civilian populations to secure shelters." As the Concord's military might was mustered in a desperate bid to fend off the alien onslaught, Jarrus found himself gripped by a mix of fear and determination. The ideals of peace and cooperation that had defined his entire life were being shattered before his eyes. But he refused to give in to despair. "We will not go down without a fight," he muttered under his breath, clenching his fists. "Not while there is still breath in our bodies." In the skies above Ilium, the battle raged on. The Concord's highly maneuverable fighter craft darted between the plumes of energy fire, unleashing salvos of sophisticated plasma weaponry. But their attacks seemed to have little effect on the alien vessel's formidable shielding. Jarrus watched the unfolding chaos from the observation balcony, his stomach twisting with each explosion that rocked the city below. He knew the Concord's forces were outmatched, outgunned by this terrifying new threat. Their very way of life hung in the balance. Just when all seemed lost, a new arrival on the battlefield turned the tide of the conflict. A massive, wedge-shaped starship unlike anything Jarrus had ever seen materialized from the depths of space, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly metallic luster. The alien vessel paused, as if sizing up the situation, and then unleashed a barrage of devastating firepower that sent the invading craft reeling. Jarrus gaped in stunned disbelief as the alien ship's systems were systematically disabled, its shields collapsing under the relentless assault. "By the stars," Thalus breathed, his voice tinged with awe. "What manner of beings pilots that vessel?" As the mysterious new arrival secured its dominance of the battlefield, Jarrus felt a dawning realization. These were not the compassionate, peace-loving allies the Concord had come to expect. No, this was a warrior race, forged in the crucible of an unimaginably hostile homeworld, a species that knew only the harsh realities of survival. And in that moment, Jarrus knew the galaxy would never be the same. The mysterious alien vessel continued its relentless assault, systematically dismantling the invading ship's defenses until it was left a powerless, drifting hulk. With the immediate threat neutralized, the massive wedge-shaped craft maneuvered alongside the battered Concorde defense platforms, its powerful thrusters casting an eerie blue glow across the devastated orbital infrastructure. Jarrus watched with bated breath, his eyes fixed on the alien vessel. What were its intentions? Would it now turn its wrath upon the Concorde itself? The air in the observation deck was thick with trepidation. After what felt like an eternity, a series of tight beam transmissions lanced out from the alien craft, bypassing the Concorde's jammed communications. Thales' eyes widened as he listened intently, his webbed fingers flying across the control console. "They're hailing us," the counselor announced, his deep voice tinged with disbelief. "Patching it through now." The holographic display crackled to life, resolving into the imposing image of a humanoid figure clad in gleaming armored plates. Jarrus felt a shiver run down his spine as he met the being's piercing gaze. There was an intensity there that was both captivating and deeply unsettling. "I am Commander Akira of the Terran Expeditionary Force," the alien spoke, its voice a rich baritone that seemed to reverberate through the chamber. "We detected your distress signal and arrived to provide assistance. Are your defenses operational?" Thales blinked, momentarily taken aback by the alien's direct, matter-of-fact tone. Yes, our forces are mobilizing to repel the incursion. But I must ask, who are you, and how did you come to our aid so swiftly?" The being known as Akira regarded him impassively. "The Terran Expeditionary Force is the vanguard of humanity, a species hailing from the Deathworld known as Earth. We detected the arrival of the vessel you call the Deathworlders and judged their actions to be a threat to galactic stability." A hint of something akin to disdain flickered across Akira's features. "We will not tolerate unprovoked aggression against peaceful civilizations." The counselor's eyes widened in dawning realization. "Deathworlders? You mean those aliens who attacked us?" Akira inclined his head. "Indeed. Our intelligence indicates they are an expansionist, militaristic race who view cooperation and diplomacy as weakness. They seek to subjugate all they encounter under their rule." Jarrus felt a chill run down his spine. So the invaders had a name, Deathworlders. And this humanity had not only recognized the threat they posed, but had acted swiftly to protect the Concorde. He couldn't help but wonder what other terrifying secrets this new alien civilization might hold. "We are deeply grateful for your intervention," Thales said, recovering his composure. "But I must ask, what are your intentions? Do you mean to join the Concorde, or—" Akira raised a placating hand. "For now, our only intention is to aid in repelling the Deathworlder threat. We have no desire to interfere in the internal affairs of your civilization. However, we would be amenable to establishing formal diplomatic relations, if the Concorde is so inclined." The counselor nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in thought. "I see. We will certainly consider your offer, Commander Akira. In the meantime, we welcome any assistance you can provide in securing our borders and defending our worlds." "Very well." Akira's gaze swept across the assembly, his expression hardening. "Be advised, the Deathworlders will not be deterred easily. They will regroup and return with even greater force. You and your people must be prepared to meet that challenge, or risk being consumed by their relentless expansionism." Jarrus felt a pang of foreboding at the alien's ominous words. The Concorde's long-held ideals of peace and cooperation had been shaken to their core. Now, they faced the daunting prospect of having to adapt to a far more hostile and unyielding reality. As the transmission ended and the hulking Terran vessel moved to take up a defensive position, Jarrus turned to the elderly priestess, who had been watching the exchange with a pensive expression. "Do you truly believe we can withstand this threat?" he asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Our principles of nonviolence have always served us well, but now—" The priestess sighed, her delicate features etched with sorrow. "I fear our ways may no longer be enough, young one. The galaxy is about to change in ways we cannot yet imagine. We must be willing to adapt, or risk being swept aside by forces beyond our control." Jarrus felt a knot form in the pit of his stomach. Adapt or be consumed. The Deathworlders' ultimatum echoed in his mind, and he knew the Concorde's very survival now hung in the balance. The Concorde's military forces scrambled to mobilize in the wake of the Deathworlder attack, but the invaders' devastating display of firepower had left them reeling. Across the embattled Ilium system, battered defense platforms and shattered orbital infrastructure bore witness to the sheer destructive might of the alien aggressor. Jarvis watched the unfolding chaos from the Concord Council's command center, his heart pounding in his chest. The Terran vessel, with its imposing wedge-shaped silhouette, had taken up a defensive position near the last remaining Concord strongholds, its powerful energy weapons at the ready. "The Deathworlder fleet is regrouping," Thalos announced grimly, his webbed fingers flying across the holo interface. "They're amassing a formidable armada, far larger than our initial estimates." The counselor's gaze hardened with grim determination. "We must buy time for our planetary defenses to be fully mobilized. Concentrate all available firepower on the enemy vanguard." Jarvis felt a knot of dread form in the pit of his stomach as the Concord's warships surged forward, unleashing a devastating barrage of plasma bolts and particle beams. The Deathworlder vessels, with their sleek, angular designs, responded with a fusillade of energy fire that tore mercilessly through the Concord's defenses. The young diplomat watched in horror as one by one, the Concord's proud warships were methodically reduced to drifting, lifeless husks. Their advanced shielding and maneuverable thrusters seemed woefully inadequate against the sheer destructive power of the alien armada. "They're overwhelming us," one of the aides cried, his voice laced with panic. "Our losses are mounting by the minute." Thalos gritted his teeth, his amphibious features contorted with a mix of fury and desperation. "Where is the Terran reinforcement? Why do they not join the fray?" As if in response to the counselor's plea, the massive wedge-shaped vessel surged forward, its powerful engines flaring to life. With a thunderous roar, it unleashed a barrage of weaponry that seemed to dwarf even the Deathworlder's formidable firepower. Jarvis watched in awe as the alien ships were systematically disabled, their shields collapsing under the relentless assault. "By the stars," Thalos breathed, his eyes wide with astonishment. "What manner of weapons do they possess?" But the Terran's intervention was short-lived. Jarvis felt his heart sink as he witnessed the Deathworlder armada regroup, their vessels converging on the lone Terran craft with a fury that bordered on primal. The blue-tinged energy beams lanced out, hammering against the Terran's shields with blinding intensity. Jarvis gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles whitening as he watched the Terran vessel's defenses begin to falter under the onslaught. "They can't hold out much longer." Thalos's expression hardened with grim determination. "All available units, focus your fire on the Deathworlder vanguard. We must break their assault." The Concord's remaining ships surged forward, their weapons blazing, but their attacks seemed to have little effect. Jarvis watched in dismay as the Terran vessel's shields finally collapsed, exposing its vulnerable hull to the Deathworlder barrage. "No," he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. They can't be defeated." But as the Deathworlder ships closed in for the kill, a sudden, blinding flash of light erupted from the Terran craft. Jarvis shielded his eyes, stunned by the sheer intensity of the energy discharge. When the glare finally subsided, he gaped in disbelief at the sight that unfolded before him. The Deathworlder vessels, once so formidable, had been reduced to drifting, lifeless hulks, their hulls rent and twisted by the Terran's devastating counterattack. Amidst the debris field, the Terran ship remained, its defenses still intact, but its systems visibly strained. Thalos stared at the scene, his amphibious features etched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. What manner of weapon was that? Jarvis shook his head, his mind reeling. "I don't know, but it's clear these Deathworlders have met their match." As the Concord's forces rallied to secure the remaining Deathworlder ships, Jarvis couldn't help but feel a profound sense of unease. The Terran's display of firepower had been devastating, far beyond anything the Concord had ever witnessed, and yet he couldn't help but wonder at what cost this victory had been achieved. The young diplomat's gaze drifted to the damaged but still formidable Terran vessel, its hull scarred by the Deathworlder's assault. In that moment, he knew that the galaxy had been forever changed. The age of unquestioned Concord dominance was over, and a new era of uneasy coexistence with this mysterious, powerful species called humanity had begun. In the aftermath of the Deathworlder assault, the Concord Council convened in a somber, tense atmosphere. Councillor Thellus paced the chamber, his webbed fingers clasped behind his back as he addressed the gathered delegates. The destruction wrought by the Deathworlders has been catastrophic. Billions have perished, and our once proud orbital infrastructure lies in ruins. His deep voice rumbled with a mixture of grief and fury. We must act swiftly to shore up our defenses and prepare for their inevitable return. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, but Jairus could sense the underlying current of fear and uncertainty. The Concord had never faced such a relentless, merciless foe. Even the Terran vessel's devastating counterattack had only temporarily held the Deathworlders at bay. The young diplomat's gaze drifted to the elderly priestess, who sat watching the proceedings with a pensive expression. "Do you truly believe we can withstand another assault?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our military might has proven woefully inadequate." The priestess met his troubled gaze with a sad smile. "The path forward is not an easy one, young Jairus. We must be willing to adapt, to shed the complacency that has cloaked us for so long." She paused, her delicate features etching with determination. "And we must be willing to embrace the assistance of our newfound Terran allies." Jairus nodded, a glimmer of hope stirring within him. The Terrans had demonstrated a level of technological and martial prowess that far surpassed anything the Concord had ever encountered. Perhaps with their aid, they could turn the tide against the Deathworlder threat. As if on cue, the chamber's doors slid open, and a contingent of Terran officers strode in, their armored forms casting imposing shadows across the floor. At their head was the familiar figure of Commander Akira, his piercing gaze sweeping across the assembly. "Counselors of the Concord," he began, his rich, baritone voice commanding the room's attention. "We have analyzed the battle data, and the threat posed by the Deathworlders is even graver than we had anticipated." Thellus stepped forward, his amphibious features taut with worry. "Then you understand the urgency of our situation. We must act quickly to fortify our defenses and—" Akira raised a placating hand. "Indeed, Counselor, but I come bearing both grim tidings and a glimmer of hope." The Terran commander turned to gesture at his officers, who began projecting holographic schematics across the chamber. "Our scientists have determined that the Deathworlders' advanced shielding and weapon systems rely on a network of specialized quantum reactors. Disabling these reactors is the key to neutralizing their formidable firepower." Jairus leaned forward, his eyes widening as he studied the intricate diagrams. "Then you're saying we can find a way to counter their technology?" Akira nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Precisely. However, the Deathworlders' reactors are heavily fortified and guarded. Destroying them will require a precise, coordinated strike." The counselor's brow furrowed in thought. "And what role do you propose the Concord play in this endeavor?" "We will provide the necessary intelligence and tactical support," Akira replied, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. "But the actual assault force must be drawn from your own ranks. This is your fight, counselors. We can only offer guidance and the benefit of our technological expertise." Thellus considered the Terran's words, his webbed fingers drumming against his arm. Jairus could see the internal conflict warring across the counselor's features. The Concord had always prided itself on its principles of nonviolence and diplomacy. Could they truly embrace the ruthless tactics necessary to defeat the Deathworlders? The young diplomat's gaze drifted to the elderly priestess, who met his inquiring look with a gentle nod. "We must be willing to evolve, Jairus," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "The galaxy no longer affords us the luxury of passivity." Thellus seemed to reach a decision, his features hardening with resolve. "Very well, Commander Akira. The Concord will commit its finest warriors to this operation, but we will require your full cooperation and support." Akira inclined his head in acknowledgement. "You have it, Counselor. We will provide your forces with the necessary training, equipment, and intelligence to ensure the success of this mission." As the Terran officers began coordinating with the Concords' military commanders, Jarrus felt a strange mix of trepidation and determination. The galaxy they had once known was slipping away, replaced by a harsher, more unforgiving reality. But if they could seize this chance, perhaps they could find a way to safeguard the Concords' ideals, even if it meant embracing tactics that had once been unthinkable. With a deep breath, the young diplomat steeled his resolve. The time for passivity had passed. Now they would fight. In the wake of the Terrans' decisive intervention, the Concords' military forces embarked on an unprecedented mission, a covert assault aimed at crippling the Deathworlders' technological backbone. Jarrus watched with a mix of trepidation and determination as the elite strike teams, outfitted with the latest Terran-derived equipment, made final preparations for the operation. Counselor Fellis stood beside him, his webbed fingers gripping the railing of the observation deck as he surveyed the bustling activity below. "Do you truly believe we are ready for this, Jarrus?" he murmured, his deep voice tinged with uncharacteristic doubt. Jarrus met the counselor's gaze, seeing the weight of responsibility etched across the amphibious features. "We must be, Thullus. The fate of the Concord hangs in the balance." The young diplomat's own misgivings had not entirely dissipated, but he knew that inaction was no longer an option. The Deathworlders' relentless aggression had shattered the Concord's long-held illusions of invulnerability. They could no longer afford to cling to the ideals of peace and diplomacy that had served them so well in the past. As the assault teams received their final briefings, Jarrus couldn't help but marvel at the transformation that had taken place. Where once the Concord's military might had been primarily focused on maintaining order and policing their territories, now they found themselves thrust into the role of hardened, battle-tested warriors. The Terran commanders, with their imposing armor and unwavering discipline, had drilled the Concord forces mercilessly, pushing them to the limits of their capabilities. Jarrus had watched in awe as his fellow delegates, many of whom had never seen combat, had risen to the occasion, their determination forged in the crucible of this newfound threat. "We will succeed, Thullus," Jarrus said, his voice laced with a conviction he scarcely recognized in himself. "The Deathworlders have forced our hand, but we will show them the true strength of the Concord." The counselor regarded him with a reluctant nod. "I pray you are right, my young friend. For if we fail, I fear the consequences will be beyond reckoning." With that, the assault teams launched, their sleek, angular craft cutting through the void with blinding speed. Jarrus and Thullus watched in tense silence as the operation unfolded, their eyes fixed on the holographic displays that relayed the progress of the strike. The initial infiltration was textbook, the Concord's forces capitalizing on the Terran's advanced intelligence to bypass the Deathworlders' formidable defenses. Jarrus felt a surge of pride as he witnessed his fellow delegates, once so accustomed to the trappings of peace, executing the complex maneuvers with unwavering precision. But as the strike teams closed in on their objective, the Deathworlder response was swift and merciless. Waves of their warships converged on the Concord's vulnerable forces, their devastating weaponry carving a path of destruction through the strike team's formations. Jarrus gripped the railing, his knuckles whitening as he watched the battle unfold. They're being overwhelmed. The Deathworlders are too powerful. Thullus' eyes narrowed, his webbed hands flying across the holo console as he redirected Concord reinforcements to the beleaguered strike teams. "We cannot afford to lose this engagement. All available units converge on the Deathworlder fleet." But even as the Concord's warships rushed to support their compatriots, a new and even more terrifying threat emerged from the depths of space. A massive, wedge-shaped vessel unlike anything Jarrus had ever seen before materialized, its sleek, angular lines a stark contrast to the Terran craft that had previously come to their aid. "By the stars," Thullus breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is that?" The vessel's powerful engines flared to life, and in the blink of an eye, it had surged forward, unleashing a devastating barrage of firepower that decimated the Deathworlder armada. Jarrus watched in stunned disbelief as the alien ships were systematically disabled, their shields collapsing under the relentless assault. "Impossible," the counselor murmured, his amphibious features etched with awe. "No single vessel should possess such raw destructive power." As the smoke cleared, the Concord forces regrouped, their battered but still operational warships converging on the mysterious newcomer. Jarrus felt a chill run down his spine as the vessel's hailing frequencies activated, and a deep, commanding voice echoed through the command center. "I am Admiral Takeshi of the Terran Dominion. We have detected the Deathworlder incursion and have arrived to provide further assistance." Thales stepped forward, his posture radiating a mixture of relief and trepidation. "We are most grateful for your timely intervention, Admiral. But I must ask, what is the true nature of your people?" A tense silence hung in the air as Takeshi considered the counselor's question. At length, the Admiral's reply sent a shiver down Jarrus' spine. "The Terran Dominion is the vanguard of humanity, a species forged in the crucible of a death world far more inhospitable than anything your kind has ever encountered. We are the ultimate survivors, and we will not tolerate the subjugation of peaceful civilizations by the likes of the Deathworlders." Jarrus felt the weight of those words settle upon him, and in that moment, he knew that the galaxy would never be the same. For the Concord, the age of innocence had come to an end. The arrival of the Terran Dominion's massive warship had turned the tide of the battle, but Jarrus couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease as he watched the devastating display of firepower. The Deathworlder vessels, which had so effortlessly overwhelmed the Concord's defenses, were now being systematically dismantled by the Terrans' merciless assault. Counselor Thales stood beside him, his webbed fingers gripping the railing as he watched the unfolding carnage. "I have never seen such raw destructive power," the counselor murmured, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and trepidation. "The Terrans wield their weapons with a ruthlessness that is unsettling." Jarrus nodded, his own apprehension mirroring Thales' sentiment. The Concord had always prided itself on its principles of nonviolence and diplomacy, eschewing the use of force whenever possible. But now, confronted with the sheer scale of the Deathworlder threat, they found themselves forced to embrace a far more aggressive approach. And the Terrans, it seemed, were more than willing to oblige. As the Deathworlder ships were reduced to drifting, lifeless husks, the Terran warship surged forward, its powerful thrusters casting an eerie blue glow across the battlefield. Jarrus watched, his breath caught in his throat, as Admiral Takeshi's voice echoed through the command center. "Deathworlder scum, your rampage ends here. Surrender immediately, or be obliterated." The Deathworlder vessels, battered and outmatched, offered no resistance. One by one, they powered down their systems and drifted in silence, a testament to the Terrans' overwhelming dominance. Thales let out a shaky breath, his amphibious features etched with a mixture of relief and unease. They've surrendered. We have won." Jarrus felt a pang of something akin to guilt. The Concord had longed for a peaceful resolution, a diplomatic solution that would spare both sides. But the Deathworlders had left them no choice, their unrelenting aggression shattering any hope of compromise. And now, confronted with the terrifying might of the Terran Dominion, the invaders had been forced to concede defeat. "At what cost, Thales?" Jarrus murmured, his gaze fixed on the battered Deathworlder ships. "We may have won the battle, but have we truly emerged victorious?" The counselor regarded him with a weary sigh. "I fear you may be right, my young friend. The Concord has endured a grave wound this day, one that may take generations to heal." As the Concord's forces moved to secure the captured Deathworlder vessels, Jarrus couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The Terrans had arrived as saviors, their timely intervention proving instrumental in turning the tide of the battle. But their methods, their ruthless efficiency, left him deeply unsettled. He turned to Thales, his brow furrowed in thought. Counselor, do you truly believe we can trust these Terrans? Their actions, while decisive, have been unsettling, to say the least. Thales considered the young diplomat's words, his amphibious features etched with a thoughtful expression. I share your concerns, Juris. The Terrans have proven themselves to be formidable allies, but their capacity for violence is unsettling. He paused, his gaze drifting to the Admiral's towering form on the holo display. We must tread carefully, lest we find ourselves beholden to a new, equally dangerous master. Juris nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of this newfound responsibility. The Concord had been shaken to its core, its very foundations threatened by the Deathworlders' relentless assault. And now, in the wake of their salvation, they found themselves facing the prospect of an uneasy alliance with a civilization that seemed to embody the very antithesis of their cherished ideals. As the Terran warship maneuvered to take up a defensive position, Juris couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would the Concord be able to maintain its autonomy, its commitment to peace and cooperation, in the face of this new and formidable threat? Or would they be forced to adapt, to embrace the Terrans' ruthless methods in order to ensure their own survival? The young diplomat's gaze drifted to the elderly priestess, who had been watching the proceedings with a pensive expression. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Juris felt a deep sense of kinship, a shared understanding of the challenges that now lay before them. We must be willing to evolve, Juris, the priestess murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The galaxy no longer affords us the luxury of passivity. Juris nodded, his resolve hardening. The Concord had been forced to confront the harsh realities of a universe that was far more perilous than they had ever imagined. But they would not surrender their ideals without a fight. With a deep breath, he turned to face the uncertain future, his heart steeled with a newfound determination. The Deathworlders had taken their compassion, but they would not take their spirit. In the aftermath of the Deathworlder invasion, the Concord found itself standing at a critical crossroads. The once proud bastion of peace and cooperation had been shaken to its foundations, its very ideals tested by the harsh realities of a universe that seemed increasingly unyielding and ominous. As the Concord's forces worked tirelessly to secure the captured Deathworlder vessels and aid in the rebuilding of their decimated infrastructure, Juris found himself drawn to the quiet solemnity of the elderly priestess meditation chamber. Here, amidst the soothing chimes and the gentle glow of the crystalline spires, he sought respite from the overwhelming tumult that had consumed the galaxy. The priestess greeted him with a serene nod, her violet robes flowing with ethereal grace. The path forward is not an easy one, young Juris, she murmured, her melodic voice washing over him like a healing balm. The Concord has been irrevocably changed by the events that have transpired. Juris nodded, his gaze drifting to the holographic projection that hovered between them. A visualization of the Concord's territories, now dotted with the formidable presence of the Terran Dominion's vessels. I fear we may have traded one threat for another, priestess. The Terrans, for all their power and might, are a civilization forged in the crucible of a death world, as they have said. Their ways are unsettling. The priestess regarded him with a compassionate smile. And yet, they have proven themselves to be stalwart allies in our time of greatest need. Without their intervention, the Concord may well have been consumed by the Deathworlders' relentless onslaught. Juris sighed, his features etched with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. I cannot deny their valor, nor the debt we owe them. But their methods, their capacity for such ruthless destruction, it leaves me deeply uneasy. The priestess nodded, her delicate fingers tracing the contours of the holographic display. The galaxy is a far more complex and perilous place than we had ever imagined, young one. The Concord's long-held ideals of peace and cooperation, while noble, may no longer be enough to ensure our survival. Juris felt a pang of sorrow at her words. The Concord had always been a beacon of hope, a shining example of what could be achieved when civilizations set aside their differences and embraced a shared vision of unity and progress. To think that this precious legacy might be irrevocably altered. Then what are we to do, priestess? He asked, his voice tinged with a hint of desperation. Are we to simply abandon the principles that have guided us for generations? The priestess' gaze met his, her eyes shimmering with a profound empathy. Not abandon, my dear Jairus, but rather, adapt. The Concord need not forsake its ideals, but it must be willing to evolve, to find a balance between compassion and the harsh realities of this new galactic landscape. She gestured to the hologram, her flowing robes casting ethereal shadows across the display. The Terrans have proven themselves to be formidable allies, but they are also a civilization forged in the crucible of war and adversity. We must learn from them, while still preserving that which makes the Concord unique. Jairus considered her words, a glimmer of hope stirring within him. Then you believe we can find a way to coexist with the Terrans, without compromising our principles? The priestess nodded, a serene smile gracing her features. Indeed, young one. The path forward may not be an easy one, but I have faith that the Concord, with the wisdom and guidance of our Terran allies, can forge a new era of cooperation and prosperity. Jairus felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease, and he found himself returning the priestess' smile. Then we must be steadfast in our resolve. Priestess. The Concord has weathered many storms in its long history, and I believe we shall weather this one as well. As he left the meditation chamber, Jairus felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The galaxy had been forever changed by the Deathworlder incursion, but in the wake of their devastation, a new opportunity had emerged. The Concord would have to adapt, to embrace a delicate balance between their long-held ideals and the harsh realities of a universe that had become infinitely more complex. But with the Terrans as their allies, he knew that they would find a way to not only survive, but to thrive. In the days and weeks that followed, the Concord and the Terran Dominion forged a lasting partnership, their combined might and technological expertise serving as a bulwark against the lingering Deathworlder threat. Across the galaxy, the peoples of the Concord marveled at the sight of their once pacifist civilization, standing shoulder to shoulder with the indomitable warriors of humanity, united in a common cause. And as the last vestiges of the Deathworlder invasion were swept away, Jairus knew that the Concord had been forever changed. But in that change, he saw the glimmer of a new hope, a hope that the galaxy could be reshaped, forged into a place where compassion and strength, cooperation and resilience could coexist in perfect harmony. It would not be an easy path, but as the Concord and the Terran Dominion looked towards the future, Jairus knew that they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.